G'day, boys and girls. Thank you for joining us once again. Ross and Jono with you, and we have some exciting news for you this week. We're leaving our usual programs that we've been doing of late, and we're just going to dive right into an archaeological update. Archaeological update, Ross. What do you think?
Man, I tell you what, and why wouldn't we do it? Because the news is just slap full of exciting things, claims of authenticity, things that were thought to be fake, and now they're saying, some scholars are saying they're real. I mean, what else could you talk about tonight when all of that's going on in the news? What are we going to talk about, Jono?
We are diving straight into a story that was released on Haaretz. Actually, this was brought to my attention by Patty. She was very quick off the mark, has her ear to the ground on these things, of course, and shared this on Facebook. And I did the same. And this is, as I said, Haaretz fake steel impression of biblical king Jeroboam is authentic, new study says. It says a nuclear scientist buys a suspect seal impression at a flea market, Ross.
A flea
now, he
market.
didn't buy it recently. Yeah, a flea market. It's real, a study finds. Now, this is interesting. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment. But the flavor, if you like, of this particular article on Haaretz is that it is real, it would appear. An official's smaller, cruder copy of the roaring lion seal of Jeroboam II, king of ancient Israel. Before we go any further, who is this guy? Should we just establish that first?
Yeah, let's do that, because I think that a lot of people are going to need this background, because it sets the whole stage. As I'm learning, working with Seth, you have to build the world that you're going to teach on, that you're going to talk about. Let people know the details of it. I, by the way, too, learned this from the Tylers. They posted it. I saw it. I ran with it on social media. And then I just dug in and got in deep with it and just couldn't get myself out. So we're talking about, and they know this for a couple of reasons, Jono, when they find an ancient relic or an object or whatever, various ways they use to date it. One is paleographically. The other is icons on it. So the roaring lion is typical of Assyria in the 8th century BCE. So when you combine that, a lot of times you'll see the Ankh, the Egyptian Ankh, the symbol of life. You'll see various things that put you in this time. And then, of course, the paleography, the style of the letters gives it away. At least if it's authentic, it's going to put us in this time frame. Now, the time frame they're claiming, because we've got a name, we're going to talk about an inscription that says belonging to, or for Shema. The guy's name is Shema, and he is an Eved Yerovam, a servant of Jeroboam. Now, this is not talking, don't be confused. We have two Jeroboams. So we're not talking about the first king of Israel, Jeroboam, but we're talking about Jeroboam II. He comes much later. It varies wherever you read it, but it's somewhere between 790 BCE to 750 BCE, somewhere in that neck of the woods. And we've got a couple of things that we know from the Bible on this guy, don't we, Jono?
Well, that's right. So to understand, I think that he reigned for 41 years. Is he the longest-serving king in the Northern Kingdom?
He is, John. Yep, that's right. That's right. The longest-serving in the North. And why is this important to me? When we talked about doing this show, I got excited because Seth and I are working on our upcoming series on the Northern prophets. So I'm all into this time right now, and the people.
Now, we're going to have to be really quick on that, because I want to ask you a question on that while we're on this topic, because it appears in 2 Kings chapter 14, verses 23 to 29. Let me skim through that. And of course, I'm reading from this wonderful book, our textbook, the Synoptic Harmony of the Samuel Kings and Chronicles. It says, Ross, in the 15th year of Amaziah, even better, son of Joash, king of Judah, Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, began to reign in Samaria. He did reign. Oh, there we go. He reigned for 41 years. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, by the way, Ross, and he did not depart from all the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. Now, that's the original Jeroboam?
That's the other Jeroboam. That's right.
There we go. He did all those things, which he made Israel to sin. He restored the border of Israel from the entrance of Hamad as far as the Sea of Arabah. I guess that's the Dead Sea. Is that the Dead
That's
Sea,
right.
or are we talking about
That's right.
the Gulf of Baca?
That's
I don't
it.
know. Okay.
That's it.
So, according to the word of the Lord, the God of Israel, which he spoke by his servant, and now here we are, Jono,
Yeah.
son of Amittai. Right, there's Amittai,
Right.
the prophet who was from Gad Hefer. So, for the Lord saw the affliction of Israel was very bitter. There was none left, bond or free. There was none to help Israel. But the Lord had not said that he would blot out the name of Israel from under heaven. So he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam. So even though he did all the bad things, it appears that God still used him. And it says, now the rest of the acts of Jeroboam, all that he did, his might and how he fought and how he recovered for Israel, Damascus, and Hamath, which had belonged to Judah, are they not written, Ross, in the book of the? Are they written in the book of the Chronicles?
Well, we don't have the book of the Chronicles of the Kings, but it's not written in the Chronicles. One thing is for certain, especially in that handy textbook you have there, that you'll see that it's only recorded the years of the monarchy of Jeroboam II is only recorded in the book of Kings. And what's interesting is, as you point out, now think about this, he's the longest reigning monarch in the Northern Kingdom's history. And what we know archaeologically is that this is one of, this period that's only covered in just a few verses happens to be one of the most prosperous in the Northern Kingdom. You know, one of the books that,
Yes.
you know, if you read people like Finkelstein and other academics who study this period, they say that the Northern Kingdom was far more powerful in ancient times than the kingdom of Judah. I'm not talking about the time of David, but once the split happens, it's the Northern Kingdom that's the most prominent first. And so that brings us to our story today and why it's so significant, which we'll talk about.
It does. It does. But before we get there, just
Yep.
give us a little bit more of an overview, and we don't want to spend too much time on this, but it mentions Jonah. I mean, is that not the only place in the Bible where Jonah is mentioned outside of the book of Jonah?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Is that the prophet Jonah that we're to associate with the book of Jonah?
It clearly is. 2 Kings 14:25 mentions Jonah, the son of Amittai of Gat Hefer, and this seems to be a reference. Now, the interesting thing about that is that Jonah, the book of Jonah, doesn't really give us a lot of biographical background. We don't know very much about the time it's written. There's no mention of a monarch. In fact, I would like to say that this text in 2 Kings 14 puts Jonah, the son of Amittai, at this point in history, roughly 790 to 740 BCE. But we really can't make that leap, Jono, because we don't get that from the book of Jonah. In other words, when we read this, there seems to be a word of the Lord from Jonah, the son of Amittai, but we don't know if it was given earlier and now it's being fulfilled in the days of Jeroboam II. Does that make sense? We just don't know where to place it. But real quickly, a couple of points on that. It's very interesting that, you know, we think about the Assyrian Empire. If you read the book of Jonah, clearly it's dealing with the Assyrian Empire, but it never mentions Assyria. It always refers to Nineveh, which is the capital. And Assyria is never mentioned. So that's something we'll get into in our series that's upcoming.
So that is curious. That is a series on the Northern Prophets. And before we jump off this, of course, there are other prophets that are contemporary to Jeroboam II, one of those being Amos. And Amos mentions Joash, right? Jeroboam, son of Joash, I think he
does.
mentions.
Can I take this for just a second? Look with me because it ties directly into the archaeology. Go with me to the book of Amos. Now, by the way, Amos and Hosea begin by telling us that these two prophets in the north, did I tell you we're doing a prophet series on the northern prophet? But Hosea and Amos are in this period, and they're in this area. So Amos 1:1 tells us that he prophesies in the days of King Jeroboam, the son of Joash. Now, what I want to do is I want to go
2 years before the earthquake, Ross.
That's right.
2
That's
years before
right.
the earthquake, which you mentioned Finkelstein, and Finkelstein has dated that earthquake to, what is it, 760
763,
BCE?
I think. Yeah.
Okay. 760,
So
okay.
look at Amos chapter 7, verse 9 and 10, and I just want to pick those up. It says, let me start in verse 8. And the Lord said to me, Amos, what do you see? I said, I see a plumb line. The Lord said
Mhm.
to me, see, I'm setting a plumb line in the midst of my people Israel. I'll never again pass them by. The high places of Isaac shall be made desolate. Sanctuaries of Israel shall be laid waste. And I will rise against the house of Jeroboam with the sword. And then Amaziah, the priest of Bethel, sent to King Jeroboam of Israel, saying, Amos has conspired against you in the very center of the house of Israel. The land is not able to bear all his words. For thus says Amos, Jeroboam shall die by the sword, and Israel must go into exile away from his land. So
Mm.
there are a lot of prophetic events going on in the northern kingdom, this being one of the events that takes place in Jeroboam the second's time frame. Now, the reason that that's important to set that context is Amos also talks about the lion has roared, who cannot prophesy? This motif
Mhm.
of
Oh,
lion
right, yes. Yeah.
shows up in the Hebrew Bible some 140 times, if I'm not mistaken. There are
Mhm.
6 different words used in the Hebrew Bible that are translated lion, and you think of all the different words and prophecies and, and so forth. But this motif tells us, and we know this, that in the biblical times, there were plenty of lions in the land of Israel.
Mhm.
They're no longer, they're extinct unless you go to the zoo. But in those days, there certainly were lions, and that motif is popular not only on various archaeological discoveries. It's on what we're talking about today as a lion.
Mm.
Tell
So
me
it is.
about it.
So in the early 1980s, Professor Yigal Ronen, a nuclear engineer from Ben Gurion University and amateur antiquities collector, visited a Bedouin market in Beersheba. Have we been there? I seem to recall that. Anyway,
We've
Bedouin market in
certainly been to
Beersheba.
Beersheba, and it's a lot of Bedouin all in that area. We've seen the
Mm.
tents all over the place. So
Yeah, it's quite a famous market. So he was offered a tiny clay lump stamped with the image of a roaring lion and ancient Hebrew writing. It says here that the imagery on the bulla or the steel impression. Okay, let's stop there for a second and just tell us the difference between those. What is a seal and what is a bulla, Ross?
I'm going to demonstrate it. I'm going to hold this up against my beard so it shows up black against the white. See there? This is my seal. And it says from the desk of Ross K. Nichols. It's
Aha.
imprinted in the head of this nice and what I'm going to do is I take it and I take
Mm.
a piece of paper and I squeeze, and when I do, it forms on the paper an
An impression.
impression. Now,
Mm.
when we talk about the difference, this is a seal. It is that which makes the impression, and the impression is referred to as a bulla when we talk
Mm.
about a discovery. What we're going to talk about now is the discovery of a bulla, which
Right.
means that it's a piece of clay upon which a seal has been pressed. And when the seal is
Right.
pressed on it, it forms this bulla. This bulla says what? Or if you're
Okay,
ready for
well,
that.
this one, it says the imagery of the bulla or seal impression was easily recognizable. It looked like an impression, albeit a smaller, crude one, of the Megiddo seal. All right, so then we ask, well, what is the Megiddo seal? This was an artifact discovered by archaeologists in the early 20th century that was once the royal stamp used by a high official in the court of King Jeroboam II, whom we're talking about, who ruled over the kingdom of Israel in the 8th century BCE. What was his name? His name was Shema, if I remember correctly.
Yep,
And it goes on to talk about that, Ross,
that's right.
with a line in the
Let
middle.
me, yeah, let's talk just a little bit about. So we found a bulla. We'll talk about the bulla first, the details, and why do we think
Mhm.
now that it's some. You mentioned that this guy buys it at a flea market from a Bedouin in
By the
Beersheba.
way, guess how much
Yeah.
he paid for it?
I know. I looked it up. It was 10 shekels, which is $2.70 US.
Yeah, yeah,
Now,
yeah.
now
Not
he
much.
now he assumes, Jono, when he gets this bulla, this impression, he says it's
Mm,
got to be fake. Now, first of all,
mm,
it's not really stamped very clearly, so you can make out the top above the lion.
hmm
You can read that with that naked eyes, and it says Lishma, so it's for Shema. Now we have 5 biblical persons known by this name, and we know the name.
hmm
The name means to hearken. Shema is a
Yeah.
Shema
Yeah,
Yisrael.
it's not an uncommon
Yeah,
name. I don't think any of those 5 references are to this specific servant of the king, but it's certainly not an uncommon name. So it says some 40 years later, after he purchased it, it turns out that it really was something else, not a forgery, but the oldest known seal impression with ancient Hebrew writing on it. So we're talking about Paleo Hebrew. True, it isn't an impression of the Megiddo seal itself, but it's from the same time and has the same imagery. Ross.
yeah. So again, when the seal was made in antiquity, it wasn't stamped very solidly, or the letters have basically been removed somewhat through time. Now you can
Mm,
still see it. Now you can make out at the top it says for Shema, but the
mm,
bottom only showed up when they used special photography. We'll get to that. But the thing that we want to emphasize is that this, again, he thinks it's fake. He thinks it has to be fake, and he has some pretty good reasoning. About the time he bought this from the Bedouin market was about the time that the Israeli government took the seal impression, the seal that you're talking about, the
mhm,
Shema
mhm.
seal, and they made it into a coin. A lot of people don't know this, but in Israel, all of the coins are based on ancient seals and or ancient coins. Well, around 1980, they used the image from the
Off at the half shekel.
seal on the half shekel. And so
Yeah.
he thinks, oh, some Bedouin is trying to fake me out here. He's copying a coin that's in current circulation. So he puts
Mm.
it, but he thinks he's an antiquities guy. He says, it
You never
might
know.
be real. So he
So
saved
here,
it all these years.
so according to Professor, and this is Ben Gurion's University's Professor Yuval Goren, he says you cannot prove with certainty that something is authentic, but you can prove a forgery, and this passes all the tests. Okay, this is what he's saying. So,
Yeah.
meaning it's most likely not a fake. So the article from Haaretz begins with, "Hey, this is probably authentic. We thought it was a fake, but now it turns out it's not a fake. It's a real thing." But they're gingerly sort of saying, and the professors are saying, yeah, it passes all the tests. It's probably not fake. We can't detect a forgery, is what they're
Well,
saying.
let's talk a little bit about the test and what they said they proved, because I know that other reports came out after. But
So I'm glad you mentioned that because and now that was, again, that's on the 18th of December that newspaper article came out. On the 25th.
But wait, 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 wait,
Biblical
wait, wait,
archaeology.
wait, wait,
Yeah,
wait, wait. No, let's don't do that yet. I
you
want
don't
to
want to go
hold
there.
off on what not quite yet, because if we look at what does the report say that made them think it was real, and then we'll hit at these other ones if that's okay. Because I
Okay,
know
go ahead.
I was just going to add that when one of the tests that they did was called petrographic analysis. So they want to
Hmm
determine where the clay is from in which the seal is pressed, and first of all, just see
Yep.
where that's from. So again, like you said, they can't prove authenticity, but they can rule out various things which disqualify it. So the first thing they want to
Right.
know is if this is for Jeroboam, a servant of Jeroboam, and we think that it's from the 8th century BCE, and we think it's referring to this king, then we ought to find some evidence that it comes from the northern kingdom, right? So they do. They
hmm
did the
hmm
petrographic analysis, and what they came back with is that the clay shows evidence that it's from the Golan,
hmm
from the Galilee, and or from Megiddo. All 3 of those
All right.
places have the same makeup of the
You
clay.
can
So that
We can
It
tick that
meets
box.
all the
Okay.
boxes. The other thing is they can determine a lot of fakes, modern fakes, have within them some sort of adhesive that they pick up on in these tests. And Yuval Gorin is the man on the planet for this. I mean, he's actually testing the Moabitica right now. I mean, he and I have been in communication over some Shapiro stuff we'll talk about another day. But Yuval Gorin tested, and he says, yeah, it's meeting all the criteria. Also, Jono, it has what we call a patina. So it has a coating that's on the outside of the inscription, the impression, and it looks real. Now you can fake these. We know that this can be
Right.
faked, but it's got like a
We're going to be talking about
calcite.
something relating to that just in a little while.
That's
But that's
right.
the reason why I'm sort of smiling at that is the
I
patina. We'll
know.
talk about that in detail in a
Yep.
little while. But even Gorin says now the patina, and this is in the article of Haaretz, is similar to the layer of calcite that accumulates at the bottom of a kettle. It can be faked, Gorin cautions. So they have to test that, and I guess there's very specific and detailed criteria to say whether or not it is fake or not. All right. What else we got?
I'm gonna
Isotopic analysis. I'm just reading it here. In the case of the Shema Bulla, isotopic analysis of the oxygen and carbon of the potato shows normal values in terms of temperature and natural water composition for the Galilee over the past 3,000 years, the researchers found. All right. They've really paid. They've done a lot of tests on this. What else?
Look, I'm telling you, I downloaded today the article, the academic article that kind of sends this author. By the way, is it Ariel David? Is that the guy's name who wrote the article? Ariel David in Haaretz, yeah. So the 18 December 2023 article is by Ariel David, and he is basing this news flash on an academic article that was published not in December, not in November, but in October,
when was it
all the way
published?
back to October.
Oh, surely.
So 11 October 2023, a series of scholars, what do you call it? Like you call it a flock of seagulls, not the band, Jono, but you call it a herd of cattle. What do you call a group of scholars? I don't know. Whatever it is, these guys get together, and there's probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them come together, and they write an article in the Journal of the Institute of Archaeology of Tel Aviv University. The article is called "A Seal Impression of Shema, Servant of Jeroboam." This article I downloaded today. It's 15 pages, very detailed. We won't go into all of that, but in a nutshell, they say despite the possibility that some of these things can be faked in a forgery, their conclusion is that this is real, and it dates to the time of Jeroboam. Now, you were going to tell us that Haaretz reports on the 18th of December that it's real. What else came out?
That's right. Well, I'll give you another article. Before I do, I'll just read this. It says, further strengthening the case for authenticity is the fact that most of these tests didn't exist when the bulla was bought, when it was purchased in Beersheba. So a potential forgery would not have had any knowledge of how to possibly get around them, Gorin explains. Okay, so that was the 18th of December. On the 25th of December, Biblical Archaeology Society, has an article on this, and it's not quite as strong as the one that we just read from. This is by Nathan Steinmeier, I think his name is, and it says
excellent author, by the way. He's an excellent writer. I read his stuff all the time in Bar. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, good deal. Bulla of servant of Jeroboam redeemed? Question mark. We have a question mark after that. Is it really? Is it really redeemed? Excellent photo of it too, by the way. And it begins by saying a group of scholars has proposed that an intriguing seal impression of Bulla bought on the Israel Antiquities Market more than 40 years ago may be the real deal. Referencing Jeroboam II, the Bulla would be one of the earliest known impressions of a Hebrew royal seal. If it is real, if it's real. So it kicks off reserving its right to to sort of walk back from it, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
It's saying, they're kind of saying it may be authentic, and maybe it is authentic, and perhaps if it turns out to be authentic, and we didn't regard it as authentic at the beginning, but it might be now. Certainly not as strong as the Haaretz. Why would that be, Ross?
Well, there are a couple of things. Let me give one more person who gave a caution, and then we're going to go straight into why do we think that some people are throwing up a caution flag? Because here's another caution that came out right after the 18th of December when this came out. Many people know Professor Christopher Rolston out of George Washington University. He's the man that they go to all the time to rubber stamp yay or nay. He always, I think, I don't know if I can say always, almost always, he says, not so fast. People go, I think this is real. Nah, hold on. And here's what he says about this impression. These sorts of tests, Jono, are very important, but such tests cannot demonstrate authenticity. After all, if a modern forger produced a fairly perfect forgery, it would be almost impossible to determine this, even using certain laboratory tests. Very consequential, he said, is the fact that this article, meaning the academic article, I suppose, I don't know if he means that or the Haaretz. I hope he didn't just go to the Haaretz. He says that this article does not focus at all on the script, and it's the script where modern forgers have normally made most of their mistakes. In the absence of the ability to see the letters well enough to determine an actual independent epigraphic drawing of them, I would be very disinclined to assume that this bulla is ancient. We just don't have enough epigraphic evidence to know. Perhaps it's ancient, Jono. Perhaps it's not.
It's not.
Flip a coin.
And so Ralston does have the reputation of being the wet blanket, but somebody has to do that. And he may well be right. He may well be right. Now, I do want to talk about the reason for reservation, but before we get to that,
you're right.
I'm just wondering if we can talk a little bit more about the whereabouts of the original seal.
Excellent
Did we
point.
touch on that already?
No, we didn't, but you're right. Yeah. I think it's important, again, we've been talking about the impression, the bulla, but the seal that they're associating this with, it's not the actual seal that made this bulla, because this bulla is a little bit smaller than the seal, but in 1904, Gottlieb Schumacher was doing a 3-year excavation in this particular dig, 1903 to 1905. And it was during this excavation, in the middle of it, 1904, that he finds this. Now, at the time, the Ottomans are in control of what they call Palestine. Everyone called it that at the time, Jews and Arabs. But they wanted to impress or make friends or earn maybe approval of the big dogs in Turkey. So what do? They're going to send this off and give it away to, let me see, do you have his name handy? What's his name? It is Abdul the Sultan, Abdul Hamid. So but before they sent it, Jono, thank God, they took photographs, they made a plaster cast, in various ways they replicated this actual seal that they believed was from the time of Jeroboam II. They send
and it's
it
just
off,
as well because, go ahead.
They send it off, and guess what happens?
What happened?
It disappears.
That's infuriating.
It's never been seen again. Some reports think that it got lost on the way. Some report that it gets lost in the palace there in Istanbul. But it's just like Istanbul is a bad place to send antiquities.
What is about that? Yeah, it's a bad place to send antiquities, and this reminds me, of course, of a topic that you and I have spoken about a lot, and that is the Salam inscription, Ross. My goodness. Right. So in July 1890, and I'm just reading, this is just from the wiki, a resident of Jerusalem, and you might have speculation as to whom that resident was, had the inscription removed who was it? You going to tell us, or is it a secret?
I know who cut it out of the wall. It's Salim Al-Qari. We know this because of the record. Yes, it's our guy, Salim Al-Qari.
Yep.
I know him well. You know him. Anybody's read my book.
Tell you.
Man.
And of course, when you say my book, if you haven't read it already, the Moses Scroll, my goodness, you people, you've got to catch up.
Right.
This is an imperative textbook for this program. Cut it from the wall of the tunnel. During the work of, during chiseling it off the wall, it cracked into 6 or 7 pieces, Ross. And several letters were damaged. And of course, we're talking about ancient Hebrew. Now, as you were saying, the Ottoman government in Jerusalem, led by, Mutasarrif of Jerusalem, Ibrahim Haki Pasha, did not become aware of what had happened until the end of the year, it says, when they were alerted by the director of the Turkish Museum in Istanbul. Under Ottoman law, the government was the owner of all ancient monuments found within the empire. So that would have included this seal as well. Yeah. So they launched a search for the inscription. During 1891, both the real and a forged copy were given to Ibrahim Haki Pasha. The Mustasarrif put the inscription on display in Jerusalem, Siraj, where it was viewed by large crowds. The inscription subsequently was sent to Istanbul, and Israel still hasn't got it back.
That's right. Now, this is excellent. I know we didn't plan this, but let me tell you what's going on in my mind. We're talking. We're in the tunnel. We're in the tunnel where they discovered, where young Jacob Eliyahu discovered the Siloam inscription. And from that point forward, from June of 1880, for a couple of years, they scoured every bit of that wall looking for inscriptions. No one had ever found any inscriptions. And now we have a scholar who claims, and we're talking about Professor Gershon Galil, who claims that he's found, I think, 8 monumental inscriptions in the, let me say this, in the tunnel system. Not all in that tunnel, but in the tunnel system from the Gihon Spring all the way through. He's supposedly going to publish a book. But that brings us to something else we need to talk about related to Galil, unless you wanted to ask something on that.
Well, I'd love to go into some more detail, but we're running out of time. I'd love to talk about Herman Gunther. I'd love to talk about Shapira and the connection to that, but that's going down a rabbit hole, or even going down the Siloam tunnel. But yeah, he has. He and Eli Shukron came out and said, "Hey, we found a bunch of other inscriptions, including an inscription below where the Siloam inscription was chiseled off," is what they claim. They say there's more writing there as well. Now, you've been in there. I've been in there. I've been in there once. I wasn't going to hang around because it's a tunnel designed for perfectly sized humans like yourself.
It is.
But you've been in there with high-powered torches, as have many people scouring the walls. But they are the ones that said they have found more inscriptions.
I hope they're right. I hope they're right, by the way. I mean, look, if he's right, it's going to be amazing. But it'll be amazing. It will be amazing. He wrote me on Facebook. I posted a photograph on my Facebook. I was pointing at the replica of the Siloam inscription in the Siloam tunnel, and Gershon Galil, Professor Galil, wrote me and said, "You just should have looked closer. It's like right there." And I said, "What's right there?" He said, "That one of the inscriptions is right there. It's where you're pointing almost." Now, look, I don't know. But that inscription, maybe Galil has the eyes that he can just see things that no one else sees. That's what people are saying about him.
All right. Now, speaking of that, we have 2 options here. We have a fork in the road, Ross. We can now talk about we can digress and talk about why the biblical archaeology is so cautious about this particular article, and we can talk about the Darius inscription briefly, or we can go straight into the Ebal lead inscription. What do you want to do? The tablet, the lead tablet.
Let's touch on you say Darius, or you say Darius and Darius?
Darius. Oh
Yeah,
my
okay,
goodness, what's
Darius.
going on over
Darius
there?
inscription. Tell us about that. Remember, now that was in
All right.
March. That was just in March.
That was
We got
that was in March
excited.
that it was reported, and
Yep.
we reported on that at the time because it was exciting. I mean, that was an exciting thing. Now I'm reading. This is an article in Haaretz once again. It says the Darius artifact. How did we get from discovery of the decade to disgrace? All right. And
Quick.
people may remember this an inscription mentioning the Persian invader found in the city of Lachish. Now, we've been in Lachish. This is the thing. Like we've scoured over Lachish.
Yep.
We love it there. Picking up pieces of pottery, pieces of pottery everywhere, and just you can't help but do it. But apparently, somebody picked up a piece of pottery in Lachish, and lo and behold, Ross, it had Hebrew writing on the other side, including the name of a Persian king, Darius. It says, so let's read a little bit of this. Okay. Last Wednesday, so this was on the 5th of March, 2023. Last Wednesday, the Israel Antiquities Authority made a momentous announcement. A chance visitor to a site defined as the biblical city of Lachish had stumbled upon a fragment of pottery referring to King Darius the Great of Persia. It was the first ever such find in Israel. And you'll remember, Ross, there was a lot of fanfare. There was an enormous amount of fanfare. Tell us some of that.
We did it. We were part of the fanfare because we
We were
got
very
excited.
excited.
We had the archaeology people, IAA, standing up and saying, this inscription on this ostraca is absolutely authentic. And it says, look, it says right here, year 24 of Darius. So it was so amazing because we could actually date it. We went on that night. I remember so excited about this biblical discovery. And here they are. Bar Magazine has got their cameraman and they're interviewing an IAA official. And then what did we learn the next day or a couple of days later?
Might have been a couple of days, and we learned. So it was a visitor to Tel Achish, picked up just like we did, picked up a piece of pottery, turned it over. This is December 2022, and noticed lettering and suspected it was important. Handed it over to the archaeologists, who performed tests on it. Ross, they performed tests, and declared that this was just the most wonderful thing ever. Now, I don't know if you recall, but I wonder what Ralston had to say about this one at the time. I do not recall.
I would bet that he said at that time the right thing. What he always says is, "Well, we need to be cautious. We don't know. This is here. Look at this. Hold on. It's non-provenance. We don't know. It's not discovered within a controlled archaeological dig." So we can't date it by the layers. We talk about strata. You dig in squares and you measure down, and you're able to date things based on things around it. Well, this was on top of the ground, but the IAA knows this very fundamental rule, but they still got excited. We took the bait. We got excited, and then a couple of days later, we find out.
We find out that it was, I think, a teacher of this ancient language that she just was showing her students. Picked up a piece of pottery, scratched into it a few letters, and said, da 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 da, and then just tossed it on the ground. Now, it's to be understood that if it were authentic, it would have been 2,500 years old. But she came forward once it had hit the news and said, "Look, I'm really sorry, you guys. I'm really sorry. I didn't do this on purpose. I was just demonstrating stuff to my students. I did that." How is it that they couldn't tell the difference, Ross?
Well, that again, it goes to the point that Rolston makes here, and others have made their point, and even Yuval Gorin says in his paper, you can't prove authenticity, but you can do tests which minimize the potential of it being not real. Okay, if that makes sense. So, for instance, in the Darius inscription, what we find is that they said it had a patina. In other words, there was a coating on it, but that probably just happened just because of a little bit of rain. But that's what bothered me is I listened to the reports and read the academic papers that were put out, and everyone said we did all the right tests. But the problem is that some of these tests can't prove authenticity. Now, that that's what really comes in on some. Now, again, there are a lot of things we know are absolutely authentic because of the strata. They're discovered
Yeah,
in a controlled environment and they're X number of feet deep and other things around it to help date it. The
sure.
paleography is one thing. This teacher who did this inscription, year 24
Mm.
of Darius, she just happened to be a very skilled person in paleography and wrote it, looked like it was Aramaic from the time, and
The
everybody believed it.
fascinating thing about it, though, is that my understanding is that it had been lying face down for 4 months, and that was enough to create a natural patina after a few
Right.
falls of rain, I suppose. And the expert looked at it and went, "Pff, yeah, sure, why not? Okay, yeah, this is exciting." Which brings us
Yeah.
back. Which brings us back to this seal, or rather, the impression of the seal, the bulla. Um, Maybe that's the reason why biblical archaeology is just going. Yeah, could be real.
It's a safer bet. Look, I'm going to tell you right now, if you say, look, this is ancient and authentic, and anybody does a test or they prove or a teacher pops up and says, nah, I made that, with my, Sunday school class. We were just walking around and I wanted to show them how to do it. And,
Mm,
then you've got egg on your face. So it's easier to take the hard road and just say, it's fake. Everything's fake.
mm,
Nothing's real.
mm.
Nope, nope, nope. The burden of proof then becomes on the person who's putting forth the
That's
the
it.
uh, case for authenticity. So
Mm,
I'm thinking of a story that I'm working and have invested years of my life, you as well. Shapira scroll, people go, nah, it's
hmm
fake, it's fake, it's fake. Well, why is it fake? Well, stuff can't survive in the desert for that long, whatever the reason. Even if
mm,
you offer more proof, it's easier to say that it's fake. And that is the safe answer.
mm.
And I think that's what's going on here.
Yep.
So we could say right now, I don't know, the jury's still out. Well, that's easy to say. I mean, do
Mm,
we know that this bulla is real? We don't, but I tell you
mm,
this, I highly encourage people to read the best evidence out, and that is they did it the right way. This academic article puts forward all the best evidence, and they claim it's authentic. This is a
mm.
peer-reviewed paper, so we'll see when the dust settles.
Quite right. So I'm just looking at the back of your book because you're such a handsome man. No, I'm looking at the top of the back of the book, and because I know there's a quote there
I know.
of Moses Shapiro, which I think would be worth reading right now. It says the sin
Yeah,
of believing in a false document is not much greater than disbelieving the truth. The tendency of showing great scholarship by detecting a forgery is rather great in our age.
I love it.
No doubt, no doubt. All right. Now, this brings us back to, because we were talking to, let's digress to Professor Galil.
Uh-huh.
And this is something else that has hit the news in just recent days, I think. In fact, this one is dated, well, actually, this is December the 4th. And again, this is Nathan Steinmeier. This is entitled Hook, Line, and Sinker, Mount Ebal Curse Tablet Debunked? Question mark. Again, question mark. So
Yep.
we're not too sure. But take us back. What's the original story on this one, Ross?
The original story is that Scott Stripling's team was going through wet sifting. And by the way, we did a show on this, so people can go back and listen to
Mm,
the whole thing. But they were wet sifting the dirt which had been removed from digs by Professor Adam Zertal, who was working the altar on Mount Ebal, what he had identified as
is that
biblical
material
Mount
from
Ebal.
1980?
Yeah,
Is
it
that
was. It
material all
was.
the way from
I
back
don't. I
then?
don't remember the exact date, but I
Because
think it is in the
he excavated around
80s.
there in the
Yeah,
80s. Okay, go ahead.
yeah. A couple of seasons. He did a lot of extensive work there. I actually have the book and
Mm,
have read it, but it's been a while. But the idea is that this dirt was marked. In other words, they had removed the dirt from areas, and they had archaeologically, just like we were talking about, they had marked
mm,
it off and determined an age, took it back to the ancient biblical period, to the Bronze Age. And one of the things that was found in the dirt that had come from a known location, according to Zertal's work and according to Stripling's reports, they found an amulet that was made of lead. And the long story of it is it's folded, and inside so you couldn't open it up without breaking it. But they knew what this was. They've seen these before, and they sent it off to, if I recall, a lab in Czechoslovakia.
They did, to Prague.
To
digital
Prague.
scanning carried out in Prague at the Academy of Sciences for the Czech Republic. Go ahead.
Yeah, and if you may have the inscription right there, I don't have it off the top of my head, but it's determined to be a curse amulet, and the connection for the fundamentalist was, hey, wait a minute, if this is Mount Ebal, and all fundamentalists accepted that it was, and they found an altar here, and they found a curse amulet, then this is someone bringing a curse to the mountain of the curse. And what did the tablet say? Do you remember what they said it said?
The translation, they say that, and some of them say, look, there's 48 letters on there, but the curse is supposed to read, "You are cursed by the god Yahoo." Well, YHW would be the translation.
Yeah.
It's not the four-letter tetragrammaton, but we're close. Cursed, you will die. Cursed, Ross, you will surely die. Cursed, you are by Yahoo, cursed. So none too happy. But we gave this quite a bit of skepticism, I think, because there is a question, of course. There's the original question of, is the location of Ebal and Gerizim just Samaritan revisionism? Which I'm certainly in favor of that idea, just to be blunt on that. I do think that is the case. Secondly, this is not a verse, if you like, or it doesn't resemble a verse from the Bible. And as I already mentioned, the god YHW is not the full tetragrammaton. Not to say that this isn't a derivative of the same, and however old this is to be, but fundamentalists got very, very excited about this and clung to it as gospel truth immediately.
Yeah, and what I think you could say the jury is out on all of those points. I mean, we've discussed, and I think in future shows we're going to get more into this if I can think about this, because I know what's coming up, which we'll touch on in just a few minutes. But again, is it the right place? Is it Ebal? Is that, as they predicted, Joshua's altar? Is that what we're looking at in that location? And all of those.
I mean, there's certainly a structure there. There's certainly a structure, but
no doubt.
That structure? Yeah, and it's an ancient structure at that. One of the project's epigraphers, Gershon Galil of the University of Haifa, reiterated the point, saying that the scribe that wrote this ancient text, believe me, he said, he could write every chapter in the Bible. And it is Galil, I'm to understand, that has said there's 48 letters in this inscription.
Yeah.
Not everybody agrees with him. Is that correct?
That's correct. Even on the team, there are differences of opinion. One thing that I think I know from reading the report is that others on the team agree that there are letters in this lead amulet, but they don't all agree on the number of the letters or on the arrangement. Now, remember, in Hebrew, it's right to left. You go right to left and right to left and right to left. This is it's purported to be Proto-Canaanite or Proto-alphabetic. I've read both. In other words, this is ancient. Sometimes the letters read right to left, sometimes left to right, sometimes up and down, sometimes upright, left down, up, down. In fact, someone, for a joke on Twitter, drew a map based on Galil's reading. It looked kind of like this. So they're making fun of him. Now, and you might be, but I kind of hope that Galil is right on the Siloam tunnel for sure, but all of these things are supposedly coming out.
Look, may it all be true. So this is apparently referred to as a meandering Bostrophodon style. Bostrophodon?
Yep. I think that's
Bostrophodon style. We would obviously like it to be true, and someone else who would like it to be true is Professor Ralston. So he said, I wish this were a 13th century Hebrew inscription, but it's not. He
Yeah.
says,
What does he
um,
say it is?
facts are facts, and this article is very short on facts and very long on boundless speculation. Anyone can look at the images in this inscription in inverted commas that are published, and they can discern that there is no real connection between the published images and the inscription itself, and that the author's drawings of the inscription and the author's drawing of the inscription, the published images reveal some striations. Is that the word there
Yeah.
in the lead, and some indentations, but there's no actual discernible letters. Now we have photos in this particular article, and I got to say, looking at those photos, I got to agree with Ralston.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I read the and you may have as well. I read very carefully the report that came out, the report that was published, and there were a lot of criticisms. You know, the journal that they used wasn't really the journal that you would think you would submit an article dealing with an ancient epigraphy question. You wouldn't have submitted it to this particular, the one that Galil and his team submitted it to.
Mm-hmm.
But nonetheless, according to Galil's interpretation in his drawings and some of the photographs, not a lot, some experts do say, hey, wait a minute, there are letters. They may not agree that Galil is right, but they do say that there's some ancient letters. But to your point, not only Ralston, but other scholars have also, very capable scholars have said, there's not a letter on here. These are chicken scratch. These are dents from being in the soil and rocks, and there's not a word on here.
It's like they're looking at clouds and they're kind of going, hey, that one looks a little bit like an aleph. It just kind of seems like that to me. I'm not the expert, but
right.
So this brings us back to this article, Hook, Line, and Sinker, Mount Ebal Cursed Tablet Debunked. So it says here, initially hailed by its discoverers as the most ancient Hebrew inscription ever found, the controversial Mount Ebal Cursed Tablet may be no more than a common fishing weight. At least that is the suggestion of archaeologist Amichai Mazar, who published his interpretation on the artifact in the Israel Exploration Journal, alongside two other articles skeptical of the discoverer's claims. And I got to say, like there's a photo of a bunch of these lead fishing weights, and it looks exactly like the lead tablet that we're dealing with here, and it makes a lot of sense to me that
a fishing weight.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Well, some people have said, okay, well, what would a fishing weight be doing on Mount Ebal? I mean, it's. I had a look on the map, and it's about 11 k's from Nablus, which is ancient Shechem, right?
yeah.
All the way to Netanya. It's about 11-hour walk, which is about 50 k's, right?
Yeah.
But you know what I find funny is that from Mount Nebo all the way to what is regarded as Mount Ebal is about a 24-hour walk. It's about a 24-hour hike. And yet everyone's very, very keen to say, hey, this is absolutely without a doubt Mount Ebal, but there's no way that we can find a fishing sinker up on there. That can't be what that is.
Yeah,
What are your
well, it's
thoughts?
funny, just to your point, if we read the Moses scroll, even if we read the account in Deuteronomy, there is this idea that while they're in Transjordan, they're east of the Jordan Rift, it seems like Moses is saying, look, when you cross over, everyone turn around, look towards the sun. All right.
Mm-hmm.
When you cross over there, those two peaks, you and I and others, ancient authors, as well as Edan Dershowitz brought this up in his book in a footnote. That's where I picked it up. But the idea is that we think we can actually pinpoint the true Ebal and Gerizim, and it's nowhere near Shechem. It's more in that region in the Arava, and that's one of the things that we're looking for. So,
and we've been up there a couple of times, right? And up near Mitzpah Jericho, we've been up there. Beautiful view. And the understanding is, I think, from Israel Finkelstein, is that he has an idea where Ebal and Gerizim are, and it's not too far from that peak. When we return to the tours, and we'll have more to say about that perhaps in the coming weeks, we're very, very keen to go and have another look at that lookout. All right, where are we up to, Ross?
Well, I think just as we kind of wrap things up, we want to kind of go back to where we started. There are several things on the table that we talked about. The seal is believed to be authentic. It's missing. It doesn't take away the proof that we have. In other words, we have photos. We have an impression that they made of this. We have a bronze or like a replacement seal that they made that's on display. I mean, we have a lot of evidence, photographs that this actually existed, that it was authentic, and may one day it turn up again, perhaps in some Turkish museum. Who knows? Maybe it could. But
Perhaps.
this bulla, the debate continues. But I'm of the impression, reading what I've read so far, it's not just wishful thinking, but I've thoroughly read the article. I have a lot of confidence in Gorin, in Yuval Gorin. He happens to be the one that I know. I think that that they've done everything they can to test. It's very likely that this too is authentic. I also understand the reservation of people like Rolston, and I think that that's healthy to have that debate. So it's not that we're bringing up this debate to say that nothing is real or that everything is real. Every artifact that's found, we ought to be due and diligent about trying to determine, what does the evidence suggest? Is it authentic? Is it a forgery? We don't want to encourage, by the way, let me add this too, a lot of biblical scholars are against even talking about anything that's non-provenance. In other words, if we don't know where it came from a controlled archaeological dig, we don't want to give it any credit, because what does that do? It encourages Bedouin to go find things and sell them on the black market. So we get all of that. But also, I would add that we shouldn't just dismiss and not give attention to things that aren't provenance, because if we did that, Dead Sea Scrolls, think about how many of the Dead Sea Scrolls, they weren't found in a controlled archaeological dig.
No.
They were found by Bedouin in caves. Same thing goes for the Moses scroll. We are going, Jono, by the way, as we wrap things up, I'll give you the last word, but I wanted to say, next week, we're going full force into Shapira. We are jumping back into not only the scroll itself, but we're going to be talking about the story, the saga, everything about Shapira. We're going to catch our audience up on late breaking and some things that we didn't even cover in the book, because we've learned a lot. We've been working nonstop on this. So that begins next week, a special on Shapira, and I'll release that later.
That's going to go on for some time. So, dear listeners, if you don't already have the book, the Moses Scroll, you really need to get the book. You have a week to get the book. You can get it on, what's the e-version?
Kindle. Yeah, you can get it on Kindle. Yep, you can get it on Kindle. You can get it hardback. You can get it paperback. If you need a copy and you can't, swing it any other way, let me know. Maybe we can find someone to help out, because I have people at times that will do that,
There you go. But
it's very important.
But Amazon, it's very important. Get a copy. Don't feel like you need to read it within the next week, because we are going to be, but we want you to follow along with us. So we're going to be going through that in greater detail, and like you said, talking about some things that we weren't aware of when you wrote this very detailed book. So I'm excited about that. That's starting next week. What's happening this Saturday?
Hey, this Saturday we are continuing. We are going through the Parsha from the annual cycle of readings. This is the last in the Joseph cycle. It's also the last in the book of Genesis. It is what we call Pentateuch reading Vayehi. It wraps up Genesis. So I'll be talking about that following the class, as we do every Saturday. I'll be live in on the Discord, and we're going to be talking I tell people, meet me at Horeb. We're going to be talking. People can get into that discussion, and looking forward to that. We will post the thumbnail, and in fact, maybe we'll let Seth load that up in the chat in Yakad Live for those that are members of the Yakad, so they can see this now. And I'm very excited about this. He's been working on it, and get ready, drum roll. Seth says so. If you're on tonight, you get to see this. This is one of these early releases you get. Here it comes. Look at that.
This is it. So speaking of the, everyone's looking at it. Speaking of the Horeb Discord, we're heading over there now into the members block. We're going to be chatting with them now that they've listened to this program. How can people be a part of that?
Very, very simply, all they have to do to be part of the Yakad, it helps to support everything we do. It helps to actually helps pay Seth for all his hard work. But what they can do is either join the YouTube channel as a member. There are 3 membership tiers. They can join the Patreon at any level. They can sign up for a year and get 10% discount. Any level gets you in the Yakad. If they're already into Discord and they love it, because some people are, they're getting into it. We're doing everything on Discord. You never even have to leave Discord. You can sign up for one of the membership tiers there.
Just let it stream.
And all of that works. Look, it's easy. Join the Yakad. Help us to help you, and there you go. So look at that. Check that thumbnail out.
That looks pretty good.
Hey,
and we're going to be back on
look,
Shapira.
This is fun. This is fun. We're coming back to Shapira. But this is always fun talking about archaeology, and now we get to go talk to our friends and let them fire off some questions.
All right. See you next week.
See you next week.